The chronometer stopped at 23 hours 47 minutes and 16 seconds, ship time, and that's when I knew we weren't coming back. Not because the numbers froze, instruments fail all the time in the void, especially this deep into a transit, but because I watched those digits count backward for 3 seconds, then sideways into symbols that don't exist in any human language, then simply dissolve into a smear of luminous green that tasted like my grandmother's funeral. Yes, tasted. I'm Navigator Tertius Il Vanistrum, third eye-bearer of the House Vanistrum, assigned to the merchant vessel Prophetum Sanctus for the past 11 years. We've run the Hesperus route maybe 60 times. Me and Captain Orvin and his crew of 217 souls. Routine transits through the Sea of Souls, carrying Imperial tithe grain from the agri-worlds to the hive cities that would starve without us. Boring work. Safe work. As safe as anything gets when you're riding the currents of unreality held together by faith and Geller fields. 11 years of boring, safe work. Then came Transit 614. I'm dictating this into the ship's archive data core, though I suspect no one will ever hear it. The Prophetum Sanctus won't be found. Ships that go this deep don't come back, and they certainly don't leave recoverable records. But I need to speak it anyway. Need to put words to what's happening, because if I don't I'll start screaming and I don't think I'll be able to stop. The transit began normally. We translated into the Empyrean at 0 hours and 1 seconds on the third day of what would have been a standard 7-day crossing. I took my position in the navigation blister, opened my third eye, and looked into the warp. Saw the Emperor's light burning in the distance like it always does, a beacon in the madness. Plotted our course, gave Captain Orvin the heading, felt the ship lurch as the engines engaged, pushing us along the currents of the Immaterium. Standard. Routine. Boring. The first irregularity came 6 hours in. Just a flutter in the currents, a momentary distortion that made the Emperor's light ripple like a reflection in disturbed water. I noted it in the log, adjusted our heading by 0.3 degrees, and continued. Fluctuations happen. The warp isn't a calm sea. You learn to read the eddies and flows, to navigate around the worst disturbances. But this disturbance followed us. I noticed it after the second course correction. The ripple in the Emperor's light had moved, maintaining the same relative position despite our heading change. That shouldn't happen. The currents flow in patterns, yes, but they don't track individual ships. They don't follow. I closed my third eye for a moment, letting my regular vision return to the navigation blister's physical space. The chamber was exactly as it should be, a sphere of reinforced glass protruding from the Prophetum Sanctus's hull, giving me an unobstructed view of the warp, while the Geller field kept reality intact around me. The field generators hummed their reassuring song, the one that says, "You're still real, still human, still safe." I believed that hum. For a while, when I opened my third eye again, the distortion had grown. Not much, just a deeper ripple, a wider spread in the Emperor's light. I adjusted course again, trying to steer us away from whatever was causing the interference. The ship responded, engines thrumming through the deck plating, pushing us along a new vector. The distortion moved with us. I should have told Captain Orvin then. Should have recommended we abort the transit, translate back into real space, wait for the currents to calm. But I didn't. Pride, maybe, or professional certainty. I'd navigated worse. Every navigator has stories of difficult transits, of threading the needle through warp storms and demonic incursions. This was just a ripple. I could handle a ripple. By hour 12, the ripple had become a wave. The Emperor's light was flickering now, not steadily but in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. 3 long pulses, 2 short, 1 long, 3 long, 2 short, 1 long. Over and over. I didn't recognize the pattern. It wasn't any navigational marker I'd been taught, wasn't any Imperial code or house signal, but it felt intentional. Like something was trying to communicate. I reported to Orvin then, voice calm and professional over the vox. "Captain, I'm seeing anomalous warp patterns, Recommend we prepare for potential course adjustment or emergency translation. His response crackled back, voice gravelly from too many years breathing recycled air. Acknowledged. Navigator. Can we maintain current heading? I looked at the Emperor's light, watched it pulse. 3 long, 2 short, 1 long. Uncertain, Captain. The disturbance is tracking our position. Silence on the Vox for a long moment. Then, your recommendation. I should have said abort. Should have insisted we cut the transit and return to real space immediately. But the Emperor's light was still there. Still visible. Still showing me the way. We were more than halfway through the crossing. Aborting would cost weeks of real space travel to reach our destination, weeks of wasted fuel and missed delivery schedules. The profit margins on grain runs were already thin. We can continue, I said, but I'll need the crew on standby for emergency procedures. Understood. Orvan out. That was 14 hours ago. Ship time. I think. Time doesn't work right anymore. Hasn't worked right since the chronometer died. But I'm trying to keep track, trying to maintain some sense of sequence, even though sequence is becoming a suggestion rather than a rule. The wave became a storm at hour 15. I was watching the Emperor's light when it happened, when the pulsing suddenly accelerated into a strobe and the light began to stretch, pulling like taffy in directions that don't exist in three-dimensional space. I felt my third eye trying to follow the distortion, felt it straining in its socket as it attempted to track something that was moving through dimensions my regular eyes couldn't perceive. Then the light went out. Not dimmed, not obscured, just gone, like someone had thrown a switch. For a navigator, losing sight of the Emperor's light in the warp is like losing the sun at noon. It doesn't happen. Can't happen. The light is constant, eternal, the one fixed point in the madness of the Immaterium. Except now it wasn't there, and I was staring into absolute darkness with my third eye, while my regular eyes could still see the navigation blister, still see the Gellerfield shimmer, still see the faint glow of instrument panels. Two visions of reality, completely contradictory. My brain tried to reconcile them and failed, and I felt something hot and wet running from my third eye down my cheek. Navigator, Orvan's voice on the Vox, concerned now. What's happening? The light, I managed to say, voice shaking. Captain, the Emperor's light is gone. More silence. Then, can you navigate without it? The answer should have been no. Should have been absolutely not. We need to translate immediately. We need to get out of the warp before we drift into something that will eat our souls. But I could still see something with my third eye, even in the darkness. Shapes, moving in the void where the light had been. Patterns forming and dissolving. And underneath it all, a current still flowing, still pulling us forward. I can follow the current, I said. But I can't guarantee where it leads. Your best judgment, navigator. Can we reach our destination? I watched the shapes move in the darkness. They were beautiful, in a way, terrible, but beautiful. Like watching galaxies form and die in accelerated time, like seeing the birth and death of universes compressed into moments. I wanted to keep watching. Needed to keep watching. Yes, I lied. Or maybe I believed it. I'm not sure anymore. Then we continue. Keep me updated. Orvan out. The current carried us deeper. I don't know when the first crew member died. The logs are corrupted now, timestamps bleeding into each other like watercolors in rain. But I remember hearing the screaming over the ship's Vox network, a voice I didn't recognize shrieking about flowers growing in the cargo hold. Flowers with teeth and eyes and stems that reached. Captain Orvan sent a security team. They reported the cargo hold was normal. Grain stacked in regulation containers, nothing unusual. But the screaming continued for another 6 minutes before it cut off abruptly. We found the crew member later, parts of him, scattered through 3 separate sections of the ship, distributed in a pattern that would have been anatomically impossible even if he'd been torn apart by machinery. Orvan ordered the remains collected and stored in the morgue, and we didn't talk about the fact that some of the pieces were still moving. That was when the hallucinations started ship-wide. I say hallucinations, but I'm not convinced that's the right word. Hallucinations are false perceptions, your brain inventing things that aren't there. But what do you call it when everyone sees the same impossible thing? When 50 crew members independently report seeing a door in the engine room that opens onto a beach made of screaming sand? When the security cameras record it too? The Geller field was still functioning. I checked it myself, watched the generators cycling normally, saw the reality anchor readouts all showing green. We were protected, theoretically. The warp couldn't touch us inside the field. But the field generators started singing, not the normal hum. This was something else, something with melody and harmony and words in a language I almost recognized. The tech priest swore the machines were operating normally, that there was no acoustic deviation from baseline. But we could all hear it, even them, even as they denied it. The generators were singing us a lullaby about the heat death of the universe and the rebirth of something else in its place. I stayed in the navigation blister, third eye open, watching the currents. The shapes in the darkness had resolved into something almost recognizable now. Not ships or stations or any physical object, but geometries of meaning. Concepts made visible. I could see hope flowing past, a twisting ribbon of golden wire that frayed as it moved. I could see despair pooling in eddies, thick and black and sticky. I could see hunger circling us, triangular and patient. And I could see we were being herded. The current we were following wasn't natural. It was too precise, too directed. Something had carved a channel through the warp, created a path that would take us exactly where it wanted us to go. I was following it because there was nothing else to follow, no Emperor's light to guide us back, no reference points in the screaming void. We were caught in a current that led to somewhere, and I couldn't tell Orven to turn aside because there was no aside anymore. There was only forward, into the darkness that sang. The second death was Tech Priest Van, found in the machine shop with his augmetics torn out and arranged in a perfect circle around his organic remains. The pattern was beautiful, in its way, mathematical. Each mechanical part positioned according to some formula I couldn't quite grasp but felt was significant. His biological parts were missing. Just gone. No blood, no sign of violence beyond the removed augmetics. Just an empty space where a human being should have been, outlined by the machinery that had kept him alive. Orven called an emergency meeting. Officers only, sealed in the bridge conference room with armed guards outside. Captain, first mate, chief engineer, master-at-arms, senior tech priest, and me. 6 people who were supposed to have answers. Navigator, Orven said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. He looked old suddenly, the years catching up with him all at once. Can we translate out of the warp? I'd been dreading that question. No, Captain. I've lost the Emperor's light. I can't plot a safe translation point. What about a blind translation? We could try. I kept my voice level. But without reference points, we could emerge inside a star, or a planet, or in the void so far from anything that we'd drift until the supplies ran out. Better than staying here. Maybe. I met his eyes. Captain, I need to tell you what I'm seeing. The warp isn't behaving normally. Something has created a path, a current that's pulling us toward something. I can feel it ahead of us, getting closer. What is it? I don't know. But it wants us to arrive. The chief engineer, a woman named Crossed with burn scars covering half her face, leaned forward. The Geller field is still holding. We're protected. The Geller field is singing, I said. She blinked. Mechanically impossible. Listen. We all fell silent, and there it was, threading through the bridge ambient noise, the generators singing about the spaces between atoms and the things that live there. Crossed's scarred face went pale. That shouldn't. I know. Orven stood, paced to the viewport. Outside, the warp rolled past in colors that hurt to look at. How long until we reach wherever this current is taking us? I closed my regular eyes, opened my third, looked ahead along the path. The shapes in the darkness were forming something now, coalescing into a structure I could almost perceive. Vast, ancient, hungry. Hours, I said. Maybe less. Time isn't stable. Then we have a choice to make. He turned back to face us. We can try a blind translation and hope we survive it. Or we can continue on this current and face whatever's at the end. Or, he paused, we can scuttle the ship. The master-at-arms, a grizzled veteran named Hectate, spoke up. Scuttling would take 30 minutes minimum. Overload the reactors, blow the fuel reserves. Would we have time? Unknown, I said. But it would be cleaner than the alternatives. We sat with that for a moment. 217 souls aboard. 215 now, with Varn and the other one gone. All of them trusting us to make the right call. There wasn't a right call. We continue, Orvan said finally. Navigator, keep following the current. Chief, get the reactors ready for emergency overload, just in case. Master-at-arms, arm anyone who can hold a weapon and keep them on patrol. If things go wrong, they've already gone wrong, Captain, I said quietly. He smiled, a death's head grin. Then if they go wronger. The meeting ended. I returned to the navigation blister, and I watched us flow toward the thing in the darkness. The deaths accelerated after that. Crew members found drained of all fluids, skin hanging empty like discarded clothes. Others transformed into geometric patterns, flesh rearranged into fractals that repeated into infinity when you looked too close. Some simply disappeared, leaving only shadows burned into the walls where they'd been standing. The survivors were worse. They kept working, kept performing their duties, but their eyes had gone distant. They moved in synchronization sometimes, dozens of people turning their heads at once to look at something that wasn't there, or was there, but only visible to them. I asked one what she was looking at. Engineer's mate Thresser, a woman I'd known for 5 years. She smiled at me with too many teeth and said, "The pilot fish. They're so beautiful. Don't you want to follow them home?" I didn't see any fish, but I felt something brush past my mind, something that left a trail of cold certainty. We were being prepared, processed, made ready for arrival. The ship itself began to change. Corridors stretched longer when no one was looking, then snapped back to normal dimensions when you measured them. Rooms appeared that weren't on the deck plans, filled with furniture made from crystallized time. The walls developed patterns, swirling designs that moved when you weren't watching them directly. And the Geller field kept singing, louder now, the melody shifting into something that sounded almost triumphant. I could see our destination clearly in my third eye by then. It was a structure, but calling it a structure was like calling a hurricane a breeze. It existed in too many dimensions simultaneously, folding through reality and unreality both. I could see towers that spiraled down and inward, gardens where flowers bloomed and died and bloomed again in the same instant, oceans of liquid thought flowing through impossible gravity, and at the center, something waiting. Something that had been waiting for a very long time. Something patient and vast and absolutely certain that we would arrive. Because we'd been invited. The whole transit, the whole disaster, it had been an invitation. The distortion that followed us, the current that carried us, the changes happening to ship and crew, all of it carefully orchestrated to bring us here, to this moment, to this place. We were guests. Expected guests. That should have been comforting somehow. It wasn't. Captain Orvan died 3 hours before arrival. I found him in his quarters, sitting at his desk with his service pistol in his hand and a hole in his head. But he was still writing in his log, hand moving mechanically across the pages, filling them with script in a language I didn't know. The writing was beautiful. Each character perfectly formed. His body kept writing for 6 minutes after I entered. Then it stopped, mid-word, and slumped forward. The pages caught fire spontaneously and burned to ash in seconds, leaving no trace of what had been written. I took his pistol, thought about using it, put it back. Death wouldn't help, I realized. Death might be worse. Death might be exactly what was expected of me. I returned to the navigation blister and watched us approach. The structure was immense beyond comprehension, filling my third eye's vision from horizon to horizon. We were a mote of dust falling into a cathedral the size of a galaxy, and everywhere I looked, I saw other ships. Thousands of them, maybe millions, all frozen at various points of approach. Some were human vessels, dating back millennia. Others were alien designs I'd never seen. All of them were waiting, crew still aboard, still alive, still aware, still becoming whatever they were meant to become. I felt the Prophetum Sanctus shudder as we crossed some threshold. The Gellerfield shrieked one final note and died, generators going silent all at once. But nothing happened. The warp didn't pour in. Reality didn't collapse, because we were inside something now. Something that had its own rules, its own physics. The structure had accepted us, drawn us in, made us part of itself. I closed my third eye for the last time. Didn't want to see anymore, but I could still feel it, the presence surrounding us. It wasn't malevolent, exactly, wasn't evil or good. It simply was. And we were now part of what it was. The remaining crew, maybe 80 of us, still mobile, still functional, gathered in the main cargo hold without anyone giving orders. We just knew where to go, felt the pull to congregate. We stood in silence, looking at each other with eyes that had seen too much. Then the walls became transparent, and we saw what we'd become part of. The structure extended forever in all directions, levels upon levels of impossible architecture. And everywhere, on every level, we could see them. The other guests, millions of beings from millions of ships, all standing exactly as we were, all looking out at the vastness they'd been absorbed into. They were being changed, transformed, refined into something else. I could see the process happening. See flesh and metal and thought being reshaped, according to patterns I couldn't comprehend but felt were perfect, beautiful, right. And I understood, in that moment, what this place was. It was a collector, a curator of possibility. Every ship it drew in, every crew it absorbed, was a specimen of what could be, what might be, what would never be allowed to be anywhere else. We were being preserved, made eternal, turned into exhibits in a museum of paths not taken. I felt my body beginning to change, not painful, just inevitable, like watching ice melt or stars burn out. My flesh was crystallizing, transforming into something that could survive here, that could exist in this space between spaces forever. The other crew members were changing too. Engineer's mate Thresser smiled at me with a mouth that had become a fractal pattern, infinitely complex. Tech Priest Var, no. He was dead, wasn't he? But there he was anyway. His biological parts restored, his augmetics integrated into flesh in ways that transcended their original function. We were all there. Everyone who'd died, everyone who'd survived. Death didn't matter here. Time didn't matter. We were all becoming part of the collection, all being refined into our purest forms. I should have been terrified, should have fought it, but I felt only a vast, oceanic calm. This was what we'd always been sailing toward. Every transit, every journey into the warp, had been approaching this moment. We'd just never known it. The Emperor's light appeared again, but different now. Not external, internal. I could see it burning inside each of us, a spark of humanity that the structure was carefully, lovingly preserving even as it changed everything around it. We weren't being destroyed. We were being kept safe, protected from the grinding entropy of the universe, from the slow decay of everything that exists. Here, we would last forever, perfect specimens of a moment that would never end. I tried to speak, to say something final, but my voice had become a color I couldn't name. My thoughts were taking on texture and weight. My memories were crystallizing into structures I could hold and examine. The last thing I felt before the transformation completed was gratitude. Not to the structure, not to the Emperor, just gratitude that it was ending, that the fear and uncertainty and desperate navigation was over, that I could stop trying to find my way home. Because I was home, we all were, and we would be here, preserved in this moment, forever. The chronometer reads 23 hours 47 minutes and 16 seconds. It always will. I'm still dictating this, somehow. Part of me that exists outside the transformation, observing and recording. This will be found. Eventually. All records are found here. Everything is kept. If you're hearing this, if somehow this message escapes the collection, know that we're still here, still alive, in a way, still sailing, still navigating, still seeking. We just don't need to arrive anymore. We already have. The Prophetum Sanctus, Navigator Tertius El Vanostram recording. Transit 614, final entry. We are forever, and forever is beautiful.